That's like the coolest shot of the entire movie, when you're shooting the giant purple beam in the dark. What do you want to be when you grow up? I want to be president. Now everyone wants to be a YouTuber, so like that's kind of out the window.
It's one of the scariest versions. I think it's probably by far the scariest version of Godzilla I've ever seen on screen.
English is clearly your first language, but you sound like you don't speak it.
And welcome back to another episode of Pinoys versus the World. My name is Harald Hilseth.
My name is Chris Ankiko.
And Chris, we're coming to the folks on YouTube today from the comfort of our own homes again, via Discord. Happy to talk with you again today. How are you doing?
Doing all right. I just finished editing a Dear Hank and John, a podcast of my own. So now I'm on the actual host side of it. So my last probably 3 or 4 hours has just been podcasts. So I feel like I'm in a good frame of mind to talk today. So
hey, throw it up right now. Hank and John, throw it up, Jonas, somewhere on the screen.
Dear Hank and John.
Shout out Hank and John, man. Apparently the best bosses you can have.
Yeah, with the best podcast in the world. Yeah.
Yeah.
In all of planet Earth.
There's no podcast.
I have no bias.
They don't pay
Absolutely
you.
Not.
They don't have any kind of influence over you. It is just a personal opinion.
Yeah, it's just a personal opinion, completely. Who are Hank and John? I just kind of forgot. Their podcast is the best.
It's the best.
Except for this one, of course. Yeah.
Of course. I do think that, just generally, jokes aside, probably everyone in our age group would probably agree, for the most part. Beloved characters in our Gen Z pantheon, millennials too, but we've had this conversation. I don't think we pull more on Gen Z than anything else. The grandfathers.
Yeah. If you took AP World, they're definitely pretty big in your mind, for sure.
Crash Course got me through life. Honestly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It got me a 3 on AP US History, baby. That's all we needed. That's all we needed. But Chris, like you said, from one podcast to another, now we're here bringing you another episode of Pinoys versus the World. Here to talk to you all today about Shin Godzilla. 2016 Shin Godzilla was re-released very recently, Chris, as we got a chance to see it with Chloe in AMC theaters. I'm sure it was in other theaters as well, but we had a chance to see it using our A-list, and was just really excited after the trailers dropped that they were going to re-release this. We've been blessed over the last 2 years with many high-quality re-releases, and what's funny about this one is that it is not even 10 years old, and here we are getting a higher fidelity version of it. But Chris, directed by Hideaki Anno and Shinji Higuchi, 2 folks that have also joined together to bring you Shin Ultraman and Shin Kamen Rider, 2 movies that we've also chatted a little bit about that we're going to have to tap into in the future after seeing Shin Godzilla. But another reason that we got to talk about this today, and before we hop over into talking generally about what we thought about the film, given it was our first time seeing it for both of us, and, I think we liked it coming out of it. Just a soft spoiler for our opinion on it. But Hideaki Anno is obviously also very famous for his Evangelion series, Evangelion. I'm going to bounce around with pronunciations. But obviously I had a chance to talk about End of Evangelion last week, or whenever you get to see the Weapons podcast. It should be out before this. And just my general love of that series as a whole. That is his child, and to have him come out and do a live action Godzilla remake, one of the first that Toho had released in quite a while, leading up to when this came out in 2016. Chris, it was a very fun time. I know that I got a lot of vibes that reminded me of some of my favorite parts of Evangelion, but as someone who hasn't seen any of the EVA series, what are your general thoughts and first opinions on 2016's Shin Godzilla?
Well, I mean, just because it's a Godzilla movie, you can't really help but compare it in your mind to Godzilla Minus One. I believe that I'm not sure if we talked about it on the podcast.
No, I don't believe we did.
One that it's one that we obviously really enjoyed. We saw it in 4DX, which was wild. And that movie is just phenomenal. And so it's kind of like, the standard is so high, and I still liked the movie, but I just don't think it reaches, the heights of Godzilla Minus One. That being said, it's still very enjoyable, and it's a very unexpected Godzilla movie for me. I mean, obviously, all the Godzilla movies are in some way about nuclear annihilation, stuff like that. And I see you have some things in the notes about this movie's based on more recent like nuclear disasters and like or natural disasters and stuff like that. But you know, it's a very interesting like bureaucratic. That's how you say that
Bureaucratic.
word. Bureaucratic twist on a Godzilla movie. A lot more politicking than I was expecting going in. So interesting.
Dear Hank and John, how do you pronounce bureaucratic? It's a good one.
Yeah.
I
don't ask ChatGPT. Ask Dear Hank and John. Wait for them to get back to you. Okay.
should just send them an email.
Yeah, exactly.
Send them a long worded email.
They could answer it on the pod if it was like if they didn't have any other questions. So
hey, in the comments below, this is actually 2 degrees separation away from Dear Hank and John. I honestly agree with so much of what you just said. Just to get us started on this, I do want to bring in a bit of the context of having now seen those 26 episodes of the original anime of Evangelion, and then end of Evangelion. I think there's a wider conversation that maybe y'all have with Chloe, or hopefully with you when you get a chance to get caught up on the movies and then these rebuild movies. But Shin Godzilla, it was kind of impossible for me not to see this film kind of in the context of finishing kind of Evangelion as kind of the big personal like viewing project that I had undertaken with Chloe prior to watching this film. So it was pretty much in short succession, watched the 26 episodes, end of Evangelion, straight into Shin Godzilla, pretty much within several weeks of each other. And anyone Shin Godzilla, a live action movie, and not even just a live action movie, obviously you said at the top, a Godzilla film. And Godzilla is so iconic in so many ways. And what's interesting enough is that my first, even more background on my personal relationship with Godzilla, is that my first Godzilla movie wasn't even a Japanese version of it. It was Gareth Edwards' Godzilla. And it was a fun time. I had a good time. I was like, oh my gosh, it was Millie Bobby Brown, Bryan Cranston. It was a lot of A-list actors. But it's not like I didn't have any idea of where Godzilla came from. I just don't think that up until that point I had seen like an original Japanese interpretation of their big man himself. I mean, you can see him behind me for the video viewers. But Godzilla has a lot of cultural importance. Something I think, I'm not even going to get into Gareth Edwards' version. Think more of just like a contextual thing, because then my first time I think really sitting through and watching a whole Godzilla film was not maybe the same as you. It was Godzilla Minus One. Like you said, a phenomenal film, and I'd pretty much say it's just an incredible experience in theaters, if it was 40X or not, Chris. But yeah, I mean, Godzilla Minus One is easily a 4.5 out of 5, a very strong 4.5 out of 5 for me. I mean, maybe I'll throw it over to you. What would you score it?
Oh yeah, 4.5 out of 5, easy. I will say, like, your first experience with a Godzilla. Is that really your first experience with a Godzilla movie? You've never seen any other Godzilla movie? Okay,
no,
yeah, so that's
we might have to keep this going. Yeah,
I haven't seen the 2014 Godzilla, even though I'm a big fan of Gareth Edwards and like the movies that I have seen. I have seen the King of the Monsters, which was the second one they put out, which is fine. It's like not that good, but like it's just like Godzilla shoots lasers and stuff. It's an American Godzilla movie. But I think my first experience with Godzilla was going to Blockbuster and renting random like old Japanese movies from the 70s, like Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla, being like, I can't understand the Japanese, I need to go to the English.
But it looks awesome.
And then it's like, oh, they're speaking Japanese, but then there's the white voice like, oh look, it's Godzilla up in the air. And then they're just like looking like little like toy figures, kind of like just whacking at each other. So that was my first experience with Godzilla. So really just blew my mind when, as like a teenager and going into college, they're like, oh yeah, he looks really good. He's not a toy. But no, I mean, but like I said, like Godzilla Minus One is my real like, okay, like Gods. And also I've seen the 1954, the first awesome. Godzilla, and also its American version, which is also called King of the Monsters. But that one has like basically like kind of inserts like a white dude as like an American reporter who's reporting on like the Godzilla going into Japan. It's not nearly as good as the original Japanese version is based off of, which is kind of par for the course in that way. But Godzilla is like that first movie is just like, I'm sure the scale of it was just insane, and also was a very like cathartic movie, obviously for Japanese audiences at the time, because Hiroshima and Nagasaki was only like they're only like 9 years removed from it. Like everyone remembered it, so kind of like bringing it to life in that form sure was again very cathartic. But now we're at Shin Godzilla, and they're commenting on, like I said before, like more recent things, and like what would an actual like maybe more closer to real life response be to just a random giant monster coming out of the water. What like laws and like regulations would the Japanese government have to like go through to like get approvals to even like fire a weapon? That's like one of the first things I'll say about like just like the plot of the movie, is that it takes a lot for them to like get helicopters in the air and then just like fire at Godzilla. And then that's when they realize that like they need to come up with some like bigger strategies to like take this thing down. And it takes like a lot of like ingenuity and it's not just like brute force. And like just the way that like they sort of resolved the conflict was very interesting and took a lot of turns that I wasn't expecting.
Yeah, no, and great points to bringing up like those original Japanese, like the first Godzilla films to ever make it out there. I mean, it's kind of even more interesting too. You got me thinking about, I believe it's called Monarch, like the more Americanized versions of Godzilla.
That's like the Apple TV series or something.
Yeah, and there's like these generally, what if it's like if you're bringing in like Ghidorah or I was gonna say Mon Mothma. Shout out Andor.
Mon Mothma.
Yeah, but this, I always mix them up in my head. But the big moth one, not my forte. The one, King of Monsters. Obviously, we got him behind us.
Mothra, is it Mothra?
Mothra, yeah, Mothra, and it's all of the lore that kind of then somehow connects to King Kong. It's just not even close to the quality and I think general joy that even I get out of seeing like actual Godzilla. Albeit it's only been 2 films for me. But now that, going a little bit back to Evangelion, talked a little bit about Minus One. We'll probably have to have a whole nother episode, another day on that. Maybe we'll have a rewatch. But Shin Godzilla just has such a DNA also kind of entrenched in a bit of what you were originally talking about with what had come out in the 50s, right? As a direct response to the nuclear bombings in Japan and the fallout of that in the country, and kind of like what started almost like a cultural renaissance in many ways. Like this movie coming out in 2016 is almost a direct response from Anno and Higuchi about the just absolutely terrible tsunami and one of the largest earthquakes that had ever happened, right, in the history of the world. It's the largest earthquake to happen in the history of Japan, and the devastation that left behind, and I'm sure a lot of the bureaucratic response that left a lot of people who did not experience that trauma and were there for such a horrific event. This is the art kind of reflecting life, and to have it be so tightly intertwined with commentary based on what folks experienced from that fallout, not even less than 5 years before this movie came out. Anno being someone, as I described in this last episode, right? This last episode with weapons is with Evangelion talking about depression, the meaning of life, how we interact with each other, like what roles we play in each other's lives, and how fearful we are of fully committing to something that would be bigger than ourselves. I think you just see that throughout this entire film, like end to end. Shoot, you even have, like, I know Chloe and I talked with you a little bit about it, but there is a reoccurring musical theme that also just like makes it impossible not to think of Evangelion. Song titled Decisive Battle by Shiro Sagisu, who in Evangelion is the main composer of all the music and in the rebuilds of throughout the entire pantheon of those movies and the show. Teamed up with Akira Ifukube to bring us 7 or 8 different versions of Decisive Battle and make it in the context of Shin Godzilla, which is really cool. Hey folks, me from ever so slightly in the future, just past the recording of this episode, wanted to make sure we had an opportunity to just talk about the music a little bit more, something that I definitely thought about after recording the episode that should have been talked about a bit more, especially giving our plaudits to not only Shiro Sagisu and everything that he brings with him for the modern takes on Godzilla, and what honestly gives Shin Godzilla such a terrifying feel from beginning to end, especially when Godzilla is on screen. But need to give the plaudits to Akira Ifukube, the original composer from the original Godzilla in 1954, someone who also played a huge role, apparently, in developing Godzilla's roar, a roar that you hear in this film. Terrifying roar. Whenever Godzilla is on screen, this is what makes him him, and I'm sure everyone from Japan to the United States across the world can recognize Godzilla's theme. It's in all of his stuff. And it's really fun and cool to see how, even though Ifukube passed away roughly 20 years ago in 2006, his life lived in the original part of Godzilla and determining what Godzilla would sound like when he was not only on screen, but Godzilla as an entity, and kind of the feeling that is behind the music of whenever Godzilla appears, wherever he appears, for almost 70 years now, right? So needed to make sure that we put this part into the pod, giving our plaudits to the past, the present, and something that I think Shin Godzilla really does well, which is a combination of both of those sounds, and it really plays into the music and kind of the terrifying feel of this version of Godzilla. But just needed to put that in, needed to give our plaudits to both of these composers, both, again, from the past and the present, and kind of how Anno and everyone brings it together in this version of Godzilla. So I'll send it back over to me and Chris in the present. But I want to keep talking about Evangelion. I know I can't spoil it, and I don't want to spoil it because you have to enjoy the greatness that is that legendary anime. But given that Hideaki Anno is just his DNA, and he's the one that wrote the screenplay for this movie single-handedly, like, you just see the writing style and kind of his inspirations just written on the sleeve of Shin Godzilla, of all of the bureaucratic members of not only the Japanese government, but the American government, the German government. Like, we get a lot of different bits and pieces, I think, that keep you very, like, either a bit confused, I think, at points, but for the most part, pretty intrigued how you're going to stop this monster that is just absolutely tearing Tokyo to shreds, which just reminds me so much of seeing, like, an Evangelion unit tear up to shreds New Tokyo 2 or 3, as a reaction to basically what you'll find out once you watch the show. So I think I'm going to stop it there. We're going to toss it over to the other half of the break so we can talk to you all about our spoiler thoughts on 2016's Shin Godzilla. And we're back to talk with you all about Hideaki Anno's and Shinji Higuchi's 2016 Shin Godzilla. Chris, I'm going to throw it over to you. Before the break, we talked a lot about the bureaucratic influence, and I think commentary and general writing that kind of, like, all around the plot of this film, like, has a lot to do with the Japanese government. Like, sure, the movie starts with Godzilla, as in, kind of similarly to Minus One in a lot of ways. This is a movie about people. Godzilla is the title, of this film. He is a main character. He is not necessarily the protagonist. I don't even know if he's necessarily the antagonist, you know what I mean? But we get thrown right into seeing the birth of this disgusting monster, because this is a version of Godzilla, I think we got to get it out on the top. It's one of the scariest versions. I think it's probably by far the scariest version of Godzilla I've ever seen on screen. There's a lot of horror influences that are kind of, like, mixed in with this, kind of like every time that this version of Godzilla is not only born into this disgusting life that he has to evolve through, right? Every time he's attacked, he has a chance to evolve and become something bigger, more powerful, scarier, and more dangerous. I just want to start off by asking you, what do you think about how nasty that worm Godzilla is when he's just caravanning through downtown Tokyo on a beeline for wherever his mindless attitude is trying to send him at the moment?
Yeah, it's just very interesting to see him, like, flopping around, like, in like, just on land. Like, he's basically just like a giant fish when he goes, but he just, like, keeps, every time he, like, thuds on the ground, he's, like, destroying a small building or, like, a bunch of cars. I don't know, it was very interesting. And, like, he's got huge eyes. He's got huge eyes, and they're like, yeah, like, oh, he's got gills and all this other stuff, and then he's also just, like, randomly bleeding. That was the main thing, like, the fact that he's, like, randomly just, like, he's got a bunch of spots and, like, the blood just drips out, and that, like, kind of carries over in the other versions too when he, like, evolves. Especially when he evolves, he, like, has to, like, I don't know, shed blood, but he just definitely just bleeds a lot. And
like,
so
this version has to be in pain all the time.
Yeah, between those two, I mean, like, evolving is probably very painful, and, like, every time he evolves and then he, like, starts shooting lasers and stuff like that, like, he has a long recovery times, which I thought was a cool rule to do. And that kind of plays into, like, the political bureaucratic parts of it, because he's basically just, like, evolving and doing things in real time, and they're trying to figure out, like, on the fly, like, who has the authority to call, like, one of the fun, like, kind of, I don't know if it's a gag, but I took it as a gag, like, they keep, like, tossing requests up the chain of command, like, Prime Minister, like, sir, can we fire on can we lift them off? And he goes, sure. Prime Minister, like, can we fire on him? Okay. There's all that, like, like, you have to keep, like, sending requests up, and, like,
up the chain of command every single time.
He's just like, oh my god, I can't believe I have to deal with this. Like, he just looks like shell shocked, like, all the time, which I thought was kind of fun. I mean, like, that's how you'd react if, like, a big monster was, like, in your shores. But it's like Godzilla is definitely kind of a stand-in for, like, big incident response. Again, like, yeah, for, like, earthquake, like, things that are happening on the fly that are not really necessarily by the book, and you have to figure out what to do with, like, the people and, like, systems in place that are there to respond to stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think it just hit it right on the head of the nail, dude. Like, talking about, like, incident response and kind of how Godzilla has always kind of been this, obviously the real monster is not the monster itself, but it's an analogy for the wider monster that is us and how we deal with these kind of things, right? I don't think I've experienced a movie like this, especially if we are going to, maybe many times in this pod, compare it a bit to Minus One and given all the acclaim that received when it came out a couple years ago. But something that, while they both are very character-driven films, that Shin Godzilla focuses way more in, truly is the government side of things. And like you brought up, how hilarious and sad it is to see how many steps of bureaucratic red tape, right? Like, I mean, that's got to be, like, the biggest thing coming out of this film, other than the transformations Godzilla goes through throughout the entire movie. It's just generally how the government was, like, kind of inept, even though there were a few members of the government from the get-go that made not only, like, pretty, good foresight on their part, but good assumptions on what this could be, right? I think we're going to have generally a tough time talking about, because this is a lot of characters in this film, but one of the main characters of this film that I think we have to mention is Higuchi. I believe he was Deputy Chief Cabinet Secretary, which is a very long title, and there were many people above and below him on the power chain. I'm going to stop
you. I'm going to interrupt you right there. One of the things I thought was funny was just, like, every time someone's introduced, they have to have, like, a little text card.
That's like, very bottom of the screen.
Assistant to the prefecture chief deputy of this district. I'm like, okay, I can't keep track of it. It's cool. I appreciate that you're filling me in, but I'm not going to remember that in, like,
no, it's not going to happen.
Now
it's not going to happen.
I've already forgotten, sort of.
Oh man. No, but it's a good point to be made too, because I think the movie kind of keeps you in this, like, constant state of disarray from the moment it begins. Like, it's like, oh, you get a little bit of the bubble, coming from the sea below. Like, the Japanese Coast Guard is like, this dude's missing, right? Like, we'll get to that plot point later in the pod today, but there is just a constant array of positions and titles and people in power that are constantly denying something is happening. And in the first 30 minutes of the film, I just love how it cuts back and forth between Godzilla tearing through Tokyo on a beeline for the center of the city, right, in his nasty first worm form that is, like, nightmare fuel. And then you have all of the little, like, tiny people and citizens running away from it in complete terror. And then you cut back, like, a hard cut back to, like, this cabinet secretary meeting with the prime minister, and, like, 50 men, and, like, the one woman at the table is, like, the defense secretary, or the all of these titles and names, and I'm sure commentary that if you are Japanese, you're getting a lot more out of. But it's plain as day that, like, it was definitely a creative choice to just keep cutting between the chaos and how slow and inept those more, especially older members of the government in power were kind of trying to, like, either protect their own back, or more importantly, in my opinion, I think, avoiding crucial decisions that if they were wrong, they would be held accountable for post basically the disaster happening, right? Which is, like, a silly concept, because it's like, action is probably a little bit better than no action, but the people in this film and the government officials constantly are just delaying a decision until something has to happen, which I think kind of leads us up to that one moment. You already brought it up, when Shin Godzilla kind of comes to a stop, stands up, shakes a little bit, and he has his nasty gills, and all the blood is flying everywhere, and the government is finally starting to try to make a decision on what to do with this thing. They have no idea what Godzilla is, right? Like, after this, they come up with the name, like, they're like, this is Godzilla, or how it's pronounced in Japanese. Godzilla has been given a name, and people know what this thing is, right? But there's also, like, this tiny moment where the government could have taken out Godzilla, and there was a plan to take him out, but the prime minister is like, will there be any civilian casualties? And there's, like, one guy with one elderly lady on his back, and they're running right in front of Shin Godzilla, and the prime minister is more afraid of injuring, not to say, like, that was the right move, But considering what happens afterwards, you got to think, all right, they're just keep looking for reasons to not do anything. And that's like almost like the frustration that I got out of the first half of the film. It's like, these guys are ridiculous. They don't know what to do, but the people who do know what to do are barely given any power in decision making on like executing what has to happen and try to save more lives, pretty much, right?
Yeah, and also everyone's really concerned about their political position the entire time. It's almost like, like, I don't think they mentioned this explicitly, but like, yeah, like when the prime minister died, I think they talk about when the prime minister dies, like who's the next up. If they die in this helicopter, who's gonna inherit that position? And then even like our like deputy secretary guy, main character, he's obviously like very like, he's like, we gotta get out in front of this, we gotta solve the Godzilla. But then there's this one other guy who just is like, hey, when you but even he is like even though he's very much more altruistic than the rest of like the politicians, he's still thinking about like, getting prime minister in 10 years. And then there's this other guy he talks to in the second
where are you
half of
going
the
to be
movie.
in
He's
10 years? Do you
he's
think
like,
about that?
make sure I'm one of your aides, sort of thing. And then I do have to mention, because I'm on this train of thought, there's this half Japanese, half, I guess, American lady who's the daughter of a senator. And it's very cute that she thinks she's going to be president in 10 years. That's very funny. The American president in 10 years, to be very clear. I thought that was just kind of a funny, goofy thing. She's like, when I'm president, it's like the actual, like, it's like the grown-up manifestation of like kids from our generation being like, what do you want to be when you grow up? I want to be president. Now everyone wants to be a YouTuber. So like that's kind of out the window. But like it feels very like, that sort of natural progression from like you were a kid in like the 2000s and like now you're grown up and you want to be the president because you have like this connection. You have, your dad is in Congress, sort of thing. So we see a lot of that from the American side too, like kind of from her and just like the random white people that they cast. The random white people they always cast, and these are so funny. They're such bad actors.
I'm like, how did you land a role this fun, like this cool? Like you're in a Godzilla movie and you are a no-name actor for the most part.
I'm like, English is clearly your first language, but you sound like you don't speak it. You sound like you just there's no inflection in their voices at all, and I think it's very funny. And then also like even the Japanese lady who's trying to speak English, or I think we even commented on it, like it's kind of hard to understand what she was saying.
No, it's like it doesn't seem like English is her. Like she seems like a Japanese actress, right? Like that is someone who like grew up in Japan, and like again, this is just a very American take, but I think it is important, like you said, to bring up because we talked about it with Chloe immediately outside of the theater. It's like kind of funny that when she would speak English, it'd be really hard to understand, just because it's like, oh, I already sometimes have a tough time understanding people in America speaking English, and like you've got Japanese like katakana at the bottom in translation. I'm like, oh wait, I needed subtitles for this. But no, it is a funny subplot because she shows up like 15-20 minutes before the second evolution of Godzilla happens as a representative of the US government, just with her bodyguard, and they're like, we need to make some deals, we need to like flip some papers around, like this is just consider this a gift from the US government, which maybe we can take even that as an aside. There is a lot more US in this than I thought we would get, which I think is important. I think not all of it lands, but some of it is pretty good commentary on kind of like, I'm sure what things felt like in 2016, but also like just the complicated history between the United States and Japan as a whole, especially on the government side of things.
Yeah, I mean, also too, like I think it's a lot of it too is Americans. I mean, like we have a huge military, obviously. I mean, that's not
bases everywhere, like
not an undisputed fact. I mean, yeah, there's bases there's like a great book called How to Hide an Empire, and that I have back here, and like it's all about military occupation in so many different, obviously, parts of the world. That's the past like 70, 80 years that's we've done a lot of that. That's why we have the biggest military in the world. But they don't touch on that directly here, obviously. But it is much more like, okay, like it's very made very clear the first time they attack Godzilla, they don't have the firepower to even like contest him. So like they got to call the Americans to like with some of their bombers to see if they can like rip into him at all. And of course that's when like when once they start assisting, that's when like Godzilla first shows that he can go nuclear, and he learns on the fly how to like shoot a giant purple beam that like destroys everything.
Giant purple beam.
Yeah, that's like the coolest shot of the entire movie, when he's shooting the giant purple beam in the dark, and that's when they realize they're like, yeah, we are overmatched, and this is when like the prime minister dies, and they have to like reshuffle the government and all this other stuff, and then it kind of transitions into a cool thing in terms of like, you know, the scientists are obviously been working in the background, and this is kind of the coolest part of the movie for me, is that like, you know, I think there's always that push, you know, between like, you know, using brute force and using science, even like certainly these days for sure. But I just found it very interesting, like, oh, you know, let's come up with this like technique to freeze Godzilla instead of, you know, the military solution, which is to nuke all of Japan. So
again, holy
like
shit.
to nuke all of Japan on purpose. But like that's just gonna make Godzilla stronger, guys. Like, come on, he was built with nuclear. He was feeding off, you know, radioactive tanks and stuff
years.
like that, and waste for years. That's why he's that big. And so like obviously it's just like stupid. But like, you know, it's like when you're talking about governments and big military, it's like, okay, we want to use our weapons because that's what we got. Like we spend a lot of money on this, so we're gonna use them. But then the scientists like, no, we can like, you know, freeze Godzilla, and ultimately, obviously, it wins out, and that's a very fun scene. But like, it's just like, you know, it clearly shows like the priorities are like different between like these two like different factions of people, and like science is like kind of crowded out a lot in favor of like more like theoretically quicker solutions to things.
Like the number of times I read on the screen through translation when one of the really good important fact, there really are two factions that develop kind of after that first Godzilla attack prior to the first destruction of Tokyo, or like the massive one, right? I think it would be the second if you count the worm guy just destroying buildings on buildings. But there is this constant thing brought up by members of that faction of the Japanese government, and even some of governments around the world that are in and out of this film, and reference multiple times if it's the US or the UN, just for general support of how to deal with this guy, right? There is nothing worse to hear in a situation when you see a monster like Godzilla than let's not stoke public fear. And that is brought up consistently and constantly, pretty much from that first third to the final act of this film. And it's like, well, what is worse than having to run away and watch your entire life destroyed by this monster when the people that were either elected or appointed in government just are either incapable, or like almost like the reverse of like some of the benefits of bureaucracy, but also like the downsides can be that we have not only the idea of it not working, but we don't have a situation where people in government are making the right decisions either. And it's like, it's not even making wrong decisions. It's like that's what's so frustrating about seeing kind of like, if I went back to that first start of the film, the calm and serenity that's like very Evangelion coded, where there's the destruction that happens with the first worm before he goes back into the ocean to evolve into his mega version that destroys Tokyo afterwards. Like, it seems like everything's back to normal almost. Like, people, as I'm sure it is like a very astute comparison to how it's like been in Japan for 70 years through these tragedies that they've experienced. Like, you go to school the next day, like you're helping an old lady cross the street, or like if you're in the government, you're still working, but you're like, oh, do I have time to take a shower? They're like, you should take a shower. Or like, am I going to close my eyes and take a little nap? And like, when I wake up, I'll be able to do all these things because we've weathered the first half of the storm. But then Godzilla just comes back in a vengeance, now with full arms, fully just like evolved into the complete destruction of Tokyo. And like you said, I think starts off the coolest part of the entire film is really like the best visual effects from the entire movie, because it look a little wonky at first. I think it plays into just like how nasty form 1 of this Godzilla is, but the final-ish form in this film that just brings out the purple beam, fire is just like incinerating all of downtown Tokyo, and it's just, they just can't figure it out. But yeah, fast forward, I guess, to basically our final options are just, we're gonna rely on Japan, and then what, the 5th cabinet secretary is like the guy with like, it's either agriculture, I think it's agriculture, like the chief labor guy or agriculture guy is like now the acting prime minister, because Godzilla just wiped out the top 4 members of the Japanese government, who are all older members that were kind of played for fools in the first half of the film. So it leaves him also kind of playing like a foolish character in the way of like, are we just going to drag our feet on this while there is a team of mostly young, but just like, you know, there's a couple other older scientists. Like, it's a very multi-generational kind of like coalition to, like you said, find out how to freeze Godzilla from the inside out. And if we can freeze him, then maybe we can buy the time that's necessary to finally like defeat him, right? So when you put this into order and Godzilla starts moving again, because that's also kind of an interesting part about like this version of Godzilla, Shin Godzilla, is that his energy like runs out after his rampage. So it's not like this endless like fuel that is just going to incinerate the world. But now they've also, I think, got to deal with, right? That's why they talked about reaching out to the United States and the UN for like the nuclear firepower to basically choose to nuke their own city, is because it looks like Godzilla is like gonna somehow asexually like reproduce mini Godzillas that might just like, you know, maybe it could burst wings like someone says in like the movie at some point. That's scary. Like, why would the world not be concerned about that? But of course, like, it takes something like that for the world to come and mostly in this case the US come and be like, yeah, we give you our stealth bombers to like take this guy out. But like, it doesn't even work the first time. Like, what do we think it's going to happen the second time? Like you said, it's stupid, guys. He will just grow probably more powerful and bigger than anyone on Earth could even consider stopping at that point. Once you reach the point of nuclear annihilation, it's crazy.
Yeah. Well, that's why I do like I think as we fast forward to sort of the end here, like that end part where again they do figure out the freezing. I do like it as very like communal effort. Like they've figure out how to build like train bombs. The U.S. helps them like on their distracting fire and stuff. They have like this kind of multi-pronged attack, and it kind of shows like, you know, when you let like, I wonder if that's part of the commentary is like you let like the younger people with the good ideas like come out and try stuff. Like maybe you can get some beneficial outcomes. But that whole thing where like all the scientists and, you know, tankers and, you know, people in even in public transit with the train bombs, like, you know, when they all come together and like, you know, there's so many like truckers too, like construction things that are like have like this injection stuff that like they can use coagulant to freeze the blood. It was like pretty cool to see like, you know, when everything, and you kind of saw this, you know, like in real life, like for obviously this is like predates COVID by like 4 years. But it's one of those things where it's like, you know, all the stuff with the vaccine, it's like, you know, when like the whole world has to like deal with something, you know, stuff can be mobilized if there's like incentive to do it. It's like, you know, who knows what you know, obviously the next response to that. But I mean, just going by 2020, it's like, okay, like we need like this vaccine, like everyone's gonna like chip in and do it. And then it happens. This kind of the thing that Japan, like they just had to like all come together because they like realized that like we're all gonna die if, you know, if we don't stop. Like when he starts moving, he's gonna obliterate the city again, and like again, like you said, like sort of reproduce. So it was very interesting to see like that sort of like multi-pronged response to it, and it was a very fun way. And he just like ends the movie just like frozen. He's just in the city
permanently there until he moves.
He's permanently there, and they have to like live with it. Like they have to literally and figuratively live with Godzilla in their city now.
Hey, like he has been doing for 70 years. No, but like honestly, one of the most interesting parts about this version, outside of how cool I just generally think this version of Godzilla looks, like I've read before that this version of Godzilla is like someone that looks like he's constantly in pain. Like it's not, again, a King of the Monsters variant, or like in some versions of even Japanese like Godzilla, like he's like a friend of people at the end of the day. Like he is kind of like someone that in most situations, or at least some, is going to be like, sure, a destructive monster that probably has some awareness of what's happening around him, but like generally has been kind of representative of like, yeah, what can that be if we all band together and kind of like get towards like a solution here? Or if he's going to be like, yeah, I'm kind of standing up for the health of this country or the environment around it. There is a subplot that I was just reading up a little bit on the notes that we have, talking about that, you know, it's something that like, I think if I were going to talk about some of the criticisms I have of the film, at least that's how I perceived it, right? And kind of the flow. There's kind of this like shoehorned in third, fourth character type person that it kind of starts the whole movie off. I mean, it's the guy who disappears at the very beginning, one of the disgraced quote unquote nuclear scientists that discovered that this was happening. I think it was either his wife or someone in his family had gotten some kind of disease from nuclear radiation. But the US and Japanese government both kind of like silenced him. So like when he, I believe, disappears himself into the ocean or whatnot, you know, they find his like code, and his code is so complicated, and it's like the key to everything that basically discovers, or like the scientists that we've talked about that are able to discover the cooling coagulant that they call it, that's going to stop Shin Godzilla in his tracks, comes from this like code. And I can't really tell, Chris, if it's like a plot point I enjoy, because it's probably like one of those like most fictionalized versions of this story outside of Shin Godzilla. Like it's an ironically, or maybe unironically, a very grounded Godzilla story, given all the destruction that happens. Like I'd say like what happens in Minus One, like obviously has a lot of grounded stuff, especially in like in World War I and World War II and the country's experiences in that. But this is like such a modern take, not only on Godzilla, but kind of like our modern politics, and I'm sure Japanese politics that like folks from Japan know more about. But yeah, basically the government's silencing this one guy, and then that ends up being like, well, if you can get the right people together, I guess crack my code and see if you can figure out how to stop this guy, because I know he's coming. So that's why I'm dipping before he destroys everything, you know?
Funny you mentioned that. Honestly, that barely registered for me. That entire thing, I was like, I don't care. I'm just, like, you know, they didn't really like, you know, because he's a guy who's dead. Like you don't see this guy.
Never do. Yeah.
So it's like I don't really care about this guy and like cracking his code, because I don't know what he's about. You know, they just like find these documents. I just found it like it's just like a piece of the puzzle. It's not like I didn't see him as like a big like linchpin or anything like that to the story. I just kind of like, okay, it's there. It's just a thing they found that can help them out. But for me, I was like, okay, let's get to the Godzilla. Let's get to them like part. figuring this thing out and actually like doing the thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Like obviously the height of the film is that middle ground and like the middle part of it, which I think is where it maybe falters again. As a direct comparison that I can only make to Minus One, I think that's what makes Minus One still like a more enticing film at the end of the day, is that like for all the destruction that happens in Tokyo and all of like the, you know, cool commentary on how the government operates in times of distressing need, especially an immediate response like this from Anno's side of things. Like, I don't know, it's not giving me as much, I think, out of like the human element that I would have wanted, but I got plenty of Godzilla, which at the end of the day is why you get this. You know, it's like why you walk in the theater, and everything after that is just gravy, sprinkles on top of the ice cream cone that you just got. So I did really enjoy my time with this. Again, shout out the random Japanese American diplomat at the very end, shakes hands with someone, Higuchi, or one of the 17 other government officials that's like, yeah, maybe we can rebuild this country. Maybe we can rebuild this world one day. It's kind of funny. It ends on Godzilla just frozen, and they're like, well, I guess if he reawakens, we will nuke this city again. So it's like kind of interesting to hear that they've been working on somewhat of a sequel, and like maybe we'll see the light of day of that, Shin Godzilla 2, whatever it could be called. But Chris, again, this is one of those interesting movies. I don't think we're going to talk for another 20, 30 minutes about this, because I think that we've covered all that we've liked about it, maybe some criticisms about it along the way. But I'm going to throw it over to you to give us your final rating and just any final thoughts on Shin Godzilla. Yeah, take it away.
I teeter between a 3.5 and a 4. Honestly, it's like, it's however much I wake up and I think about how well the political stuff worked for me, and I think it mostly does, but just like the level of engagement that I have with it. I thought the effects, even though it sounds like you and Chloe were talking about afterwards, it's kind of like an homage to the early Godzillas. I thought personally it was a little rough around the edges, just because, again, Godzilla Minus One is the sort of the apex of Godzilla movies that we've seen, and like they won the Oscars for best visual effects, and those effects are just spectacular.
Oh man, did they deserve it
the entire way through? And the effects here are good, but it just looks a little rough. It feels like there's like things about the physics, like when he's like toppling over boats or just even like walking at times, where I'm just like, you know, it looks like they needed like one more pass or just like a little bit more budget to like really like get it all the way there. Like it's like 90% there, but there's just little bits of it. I'm just like, it looks a little bit like, oh, this thing just kind of boinged into this boat, just kind of boinged into this other boat and kind of like just kind of flew. But other than that, like I you know, always enjoy seeing a movie in theaters, especially a Godzilla one, and for the most part, I thought it was pretty good. So yeah.
Yeah, no, Chris, a lot of things I agree with. I think I will kind of sit at a 4. Again, hard for me not to see so many of Anno's influences on this movie, especially having seen all of Evangelion up until that point, or at least, you know, that original series. And it's really fun to see the vision of someone that like, works in an animation studio, mostly anime, take to the live action big screen. And it kind of, in some aspects, especially when Godzilla is on screen, kind of feels like a live action anime, like the best of the best type that you can get out of that, especially one from Japan. But yeah, no, I agree. I think at some points the bureaucratic plots and again the subplots of trying to make some fictionalized story about a man who was kind of like, well, you silenced me, so good luck with this, just really didn't hit for me. And comparatively to what is the King Godzilla like type visual effects masterpieces in Minus One, like I don't think this comes as close. Like, sure, the middle Tokyo scene, the destruction of Tokyo will stick with me forever. Such a blast to see that city get destroyed by Godzilla, like in 4K on the big screen, like you said. Just really fun to see those in theaters. But everything kind of around it was a mix of really good to some mediocre kind of storytelling, in my opinion, that slowed down the pace of a movie that I think could have been a bit stronger. Like you said, maybe one or two more passes gets you cutting some of the fat, work on some of the visual effects, and then, along the way, we get a movie that's maybe something that people across the board might have enjoyed more. But I know this got so much love in Japan. Like, people friggin' love this movie. They love Anno out there, and we love Anno here. I'm excited for you to tap into Evangelion, and maybe one day we'll talk about what you think about the two comparisons of this film. But Chris, yeah, as always, was really fun watching this movie with you in person. And shout out Godzilla forever and always. I can't wait for either a Minus One or a Shin Godzilla sequel, because I'm sure they will be friggin' spectacular.
Yeah, they already announced a Minus One sequel.
Oh, come on. Let's go.
They're doing it. Like I saw that like 2 weeks ago that they announced a Minus One sequel. So they're doing one. So looking forward to that. Yeah.
Looking forward to that. But Chris, before you got to run off to see the Mariners hopefully win the series against the Padres, what have you been watching? Let's get through it real quick. Talk to the people.
All right, I only got a couple things. I saw the release of K-pop Demon Hunters in theaters.
Yes, you did
Sunday.
It. Awesome.
Oh my God. It is so good. It is incredible. The music is incredible. Like I go to that movie to hear it, experience the sound and the music, and like, man, Golden, like what it sounds like, Free, those are bangers in a theater. Let me tell you. Like, it's very easy to say like they should have released it in theaters to begin with, but it wouldn't have been the phenomenon it is if it wasn't like so successful in streaming that Netflix is like, okay, fine, we'll put it in theaters for 2 days, which is like kind of insane to think about. And there were like so many showings of it that on the Regal that I saw, like literally when I walked in, there was the theater that had just started the movie right next to it, and I could hear it playing. And then we were going in, and it was a lot of like families for sure, because it was the sing along version. And one thing that I really enjoyed about it is that a bunch of the kids were like, "Why are there so many commercials? Play the movie already!" And like, that's
incredible.
And I'm like, you know what? That's facts. Honestly, like, you're just saying the quiet part out loud. Like that's what we really want to hear. Like, I'm glad the kids are like, they're identifying like, what's with all these commercials? And like, they would even shout out one like, I saw this one already. Like, there was like some Gatorade commercial, like, I saw this one already. But going back to the movie, people in there were having a great time with the songs. They sound great in the theater, and I'd easily give it a 4 out of 5 experience.
Let's go.
For sure.
Go.
I have definitely upped my rating because I like the music so much. I listen to music like all the time. Then the other movie I'll say is Freaky Friday. I have not seen Freaky Friday. I'm not sure if I plan to anytime soon, but I watched the original because I had only seen the trailer of it when I was a kid, and I figured this was a good excuse to actually watch the movie. And that's a 4.5 out of 5 movie. Let me tell you. I mean, it's got like the one outdated thing is that they switched because of Chinese voodoo magic, which is kind of sketch. But that's kind of a byproduct of the times that like, the things that American movies could get away with at the time, and even like decades before. That was kind of one of the last like remnants of like, oh,
that's wild.
You can't use Asian voodoo magic to like have these two people switch bodies.
No.
But that's the only like flaw that I thought like, and it didn't really even bother me like that much because like the rest of the movie is like so good because like it's Jamie Lee Curtis for one thing, like that should have been her Oscar. Like, forget Everything Everywhere All at Once. Like, she does a great job in Freaky Friday. She just plays like a teenager so well, and like everything, and even like Lindsay Lohan, like everyone in the movie is good, and like the writing's really good, and like the appreciation, the whole moral, like walking a mile in someone else's shoes, so you kind of like develop empathy for other people. I thought was really a good message, and like the movie's just like really entertaining, and like there's some songs in there you're just like they're unreleased songs, just bangers. But yeah, Great movie, Freaky Friday. If you haven't seen it, recommend. What about you?
I just gotta say I have very fond memories of seeing that on Disney Channel growing up. Just stuck in the frontal cortex. Good to hear that it's held up. Good to hear that it's held up.
No, it holds up really well. Yeah.
Nice. Well, I'm probably gonna kind of just keep with our love of media coming out of Japan, but I'm gonna start off by saying Kaiju number 8. I really had my doubts, but roommate Chris Huey had it on the other day. May or may not have binged all of season 1 and caught up into season 2. So we love Kaiju number 8. I think it's just a really fun show, and you're not getting really like a whole lot in the story, anything, but it's just like, come on, where's JJK at? I don't know. For now, it's Kaiju number 8. So I really enjoyed that. We'll see how the season ends. It's been great animation, enticing enough story, but come on, animation is sometimes why I come to the couch to watch some of these certain animes. So that's really been really fun to watch week to week. Maybe just one, Jonas, let's throw one just Okarun, one Ken just running across the screen because I just love where Don Don is right now. I've talked about it before on the pod. Last 2 episodes have been absolute bangers. Will continue to be bangers. Tap in if you haven't yet. And I'm going to finish actually with something that I've been playing because actually more than anything other than Kaiju this week, speaking of Kaijus, I have been playing a lot of Elden Ring Night Rain, which is a multiplayer version of Elden Ring, and maybe we'll occasionally dive into this because I've got a lot of backlog to work through, Chris, on Steam and on the PlayStation catalog. But it has been really fun to play Elden Ring from Software. Y'all are geniuses. Can't wait for the next game to come out. I'm giving Elden Ring Night Rain a 4 probably out of 5. That would be funny, but I'm giving Elden Ring a 5 out of 5. One of the greatest games I've ever played. Also a good shout out to good homies of the group like Henry, Julian, and Chloe, keeping me accountable and finishing a game like that. 170 hours, Chris, that I put into that. And that's like 1/10 of what most people do. It's ridiculous. You can spend hours in that game. But would recommend Elden Ring just in general, but been playing Night Rain. So that's been a lot of fun. But Chris, I think that's just left us to the end of this, another episode of Pinoys versus the World, as always, executively produced by Jonas Hilseth. And you can catch us at Pinoys versus. Subscribe, like, all of that good stuff. Chris, I'm going to let you go to the Seattle Mariners game. Go M's. But I'll end this by saying, my name is Harald Hilseth.
My name is Chris Ankiko.
And we will talk with you all in the next episode of Pinoys versus the World. Peace.